the Global Food Regulatory Science Society. G-Force mission includes knowledge generation and dissemination, underpinning food regulatory decisions, in support of food control systems, Our interventions focus on promoting food regulatory scientific disciplines. Consistent reliance on food regulatory sciences enables robust food control programs, contributing to more resilient food systems and a safe, accessible, abundant and nutritious food supply.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Good morning to you all. It is a true pleasure to see many of you at this session. I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Samuel Godefroy. I serve as a professor of food risk analysis and regulatory policies at Laval University in Quebec, Canada. And I have also the privilege to serve as the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Global Food Regulatory Science Society, a disciplinary organization of the International Union of Food Science and Technology. It is a pleasure to welcome you here today at this session that we have entitled Promoting Regional Global Collaborations, Regional and Global Collaborations in Food Regulatory Science. We are very thankful to the 19th Dubai International Food Safety Conference and to the organizers to have hosted or to have agreed to host this particular session that we have developed in the form of a discussion, hopefully, a discussion with all of you, as well as with some opinion leaders in this particular field that I will start by introducing. So I'm going to ask actually my colleagues here, members of this panel, to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Samuel. My name is Greg Powley. I'm CEO of Risk Sciences International, also a member of the board of G-Force, and I've specialized in quantitative risk assessment techniques, and I'll be contributing a little bit on how that needs to become a more collaborative piece of work. So.
Okay, my name is Mailinda Laraniatis. I am Deputy Director for International Affairs at the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment in Berlin, Germany. I have as well the pleasure and the honor to be the co-chair of an international liaison group on methods for risk assessment of chemicals in food and feed.
Good morning, I'm Mohassana. I'm currently leading the standard scientific advice in WHO on food and nutrition. My experience before WHO, I'm I used to be professor at university teaching epidemiology, biostatistics, and risk analysis. And I had experience in delivering, providing scientific advice and risk assessment in EFSA and in France, and of course in WHO. So, and mainly WHO, we are providing scientific advice to Codex Alimentarius Commission.
Well, thank you and welcome to you all. And we're happy to see many of you here who have chosen, because we know that the offering, the scientific offering of the Dubai International Food Safety Conference is really important. So for us, it means a lot to see many of the opinion leaders from industry, from regulators, from academia being present at this session to discuss with us. We're also broadcasting this session live on the YouTube stream of the Global Food Regulatory Science Society. So hopefully others will be also able to interact with us or potentially use also this discussion for further deliberations. What are we trying to do through this session? I believe that you would agree, if you agree to attend this session, that food regulatory science, and particularly a component of food regulatory science that is the aspects that support food risk analysis, is a key element that enables decision making, whether be it by regulators or industry, in a manner that will make it robust, trustworthy, predictable, and satisfying international benchmarks that are expected by both consumers but also the regulated parties that are the industry. What we would like to discuss is to see what is the current landscape for what is available right now to enable the science or the scientific disciplines and their outputs, primarily risk assessments that inform decision-making processes, and subsequent analysis of these risk assessments to formulate policies, to formulate decisions. So we're trying to see what is the current landscape right now, what is available in the global environment, meaning what we are all sharing in terms of resources, identify the strength of the systems, the benefits that we are all taking advantage of in terms of relying on this system. Also discussing the future, because this system is working right now, but it is facing challenges. And these challenges, in fact, are being discussed on a regular basis. Last week, at the Codex Alimentarius Commission meeting during its 48th session, the issue of sustainability of resources to support scientific assessments that underpin global decision-making was a key element of discussion. So this is one of the challenges: resources, competencies, availability of data, the capacity to produce responses in a manner that is timely. We know that industry is innovating. We know that there are every day new products, new processes, new applications, and these developments will not be beneficial unless they access the market. They would not be able to access the market unless we have systems in place that would enable those, and food regulatory science and particularly scientific assessments are key enablers or potentially disablers for these developments. So what we would like to do is really look at the landscape, discuss the challenges, look at what exists right now to overcome these, and potentially also share a vision for other solutions that we could collectively contemplate. Just to give you an example, the organization that is co-organizing this session today, which is the Global Food Regulatory Science Society, was born out of a similar discussion that took place 6 years ago in the same place, in Dubai. If these walls could talk, they would actually remind us of the history of the creation of G-Force. It was based on a discussion such as this one, where we had identified the need for a forum to support collaboration in this area, that G-Force was born. So the question is, are there other things that we can do in this realm, particularly to address this challenge? Now, to structure this discussion the way we have proposed to do that, we have 3 blocks of discussions. I will have the privilege to start the first block, which will aim to look at the scene, the current scene of international collaboration for scientific assessments, and primarily relying on the FAO, WHO-based systems, basically whatever enables Codex to make its decisions. Subsequently, my colleague, Dr. Melinda Laniatis, will be reviewing existing collaborative frameworks, and particularly one key one that she introduced today, which is the ILMERAC, for example, as an example of these collaborative frameworks, but also discussing, all the different mechanisms that potentially exist or that could be leveraged. And then subsequently, my colleague, Dr. Moaz Hassana, will be using his experience in leading the scientific advice in a major partner of the international process to provide such scientific advice in WHO, to really share a perspective of the future. What can we do? What else can we do to complement what exists and to address the challenges at hand? So this is how we hope the discussion will go. But of course, what we would like is that this discussion is not a monologue amongst the table. You see also even that the shape of the room, we changed it in such a way that it is basically a circle of discussion. It's not a classroom. You're not here to hear people talk. We're hoping that we will hear from you. Give us your ideas, your advice, your opinions, share your challenges, maybe also offer us some opportunities that we may not have necessarily identified and that we could leverage. So this is really the objective, and we're going to use basically the time that is allotted to the session, so about 2 hours for this purpose. So, without further ado, I'm going to start, unless there is any question. Actually, I'm going to start with that. Is there any question or any comment on what we are about to embark upon, or what we are embarking to do together? We're good? So we're all accepting the mission. Perfect. So let's go. So, starting really with the current landscape. Just a reminder, just really to set the scene. What are we relying on right now in terms of the international process for scientific assessment? And of course, when we think of that, the main element that we will be thinking of is Codex. And this is a representation about the way the international food standardization process works. As we know, Codex, with its subsidiary bodies, is the body that makes risk management decisions. So essentially, standards, guidelines, whether be it to support the management of food that is traded internationally, so standards really that govern the way things ought to be traded, and these standards, as you know, are referenced in the World Trade Organization's agreements, but also guidelines and texts that are provided to national governments and also to the regulated industry as to how best to apply preventive controls, to apply food safety management systems in a way that protect consumers, but also make sure that food continue to flow freely or as freely as possible between jurisdictions. So that's essentially the mandate of Codex. And that covers both aspects of food safety and nutrition, which requires the scientific assessment, but also quality, which also requires evidence-based decision-making. Now, to underpin that and to support that, whenever Codex needs advice, and by the way, this advice or seeking advice is also mandated by the decision-making framework that Codex adopted to follow, which is the food risk analysis principles. So I'm hearing myself talk. I shouldn't be. So whenever Codex needs advice, and as we said, this is mandated that for Codex to make a decision making, particularly when it comes to food safety and nutrition, a risk assessment would be requested from advisory bodies. These advisory bodies are managed by, they are in fact a component even of the International Food Standards Program, because if you recall, and this is maybe for those of us who are just recalling about the way the system was shaped, even prior to Codex, the system started by the creation of the International Food Standards Program, which had 3 pillars. The pillars of standard setting that became Codex, the pillar of scientific advice, which continues to be, that's essentially the element on top, the international risk assessment bodies that we're going to review briefly. And the third pillar is capacity building. It's basically providing support to governments, to organizations, such that we propagate this way of doing business. Now, the scientific advice right now is mainly occupied by these joint bodies that are administered by FAO and WHO for food additives, contaminants, for veterinary drug residues, including also for flavoring agents and so on. We have JECFA. I'm sure that you've heard the acronym JECFA so often. Okay? It's the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives. Even though we say only food additives, it covers all the others. It covers contaminants and veterinary drug residues, amongst other things. When it comes to pesticide residues, we have a dedicated body. And that's JMPR, the joint meeting, the joint expert meeting for pesticide residues, providing, again, scientific advice to the equivalent system to make decisions, that is CCPR, the Codex Committee on Pesticide Residues in Food. When we have questions about nutrition, we rely on GEMNU, and that's the Joint Expert Meeting on Nutrition. And when we have questions in relation with microbiological issues, whether be it pathogens, whether be it process control methods, basically we rely on GEMRA. Again, this is the Joint Expert Meeting on Microbiological Risk Assessment. These bodies are administered in accordance to a set process, whether be it in the selection of experts, whether be it in the access to data, in the way essentially the output of their advice is provided, and that's very well codified. But as you know, and as we have experienced as well, is that these bodies are not enough to address all the issues. And when there is a special issue that arises, whether because it's not in the plan, because these bodies have plans, they have programs, so there is an emerging issue, or it is an issue that is cross-cutting, we cannot fit it very well in a particular area, then we rely on ad hoc expert meetings. A couple of those that I would mention that were the result of emerging issues. The ad hoc expert consultation that was conducted on bisphenol A in 2010, the one that was conducted on melamine, and most recently, the expert meetings that took place in relation with allergen risk assessments, looking for thresholds, looking to provide guidance on the way precautionary allergen labeling would be used, and so on. So this is how the system is or has been working so far. Now, there are questions about the way the system works. I mean, it has been fulfilling its mandate and really has been, in fact, the point of reference that we have been relying upon. Every time there is a question, we say, like I'm going to give you the example, when the US FDA banned the use of erythrosine at the beginning of the year, and that was not a science-based decision, by the way. It was not a decision that was coming from a risk issue, but rather from a legal situation specific to the United States, that is the Delaney Clause. Everybody went back and said, what did JECFA say? When was that? You know, was it recent? And we discovered that there was a recent JECFA reevaluation of erythrosine dating back to 2018 that gave us an ADI that supported the most recent decision that was made by Codex. When the issue of titanium dioxide emerged, same thing, we had a discrepancy of positions. Some countries decided to take action on it because of some uncertainties. Others decided to keep a decision. Everybody went back. What did JECFA do? And in fact, JECFA was even asked by CCFA, the Codex Committee on Food Additives, to actually update its risk assessment as a result of a number of jurisdictions updating their risk management approaches. So that's what has been working. But again, the question that emerges now, and by the way, this is how the basically the flow of information moves. Generally, Codex asks questions, and those expert bodies provide answers. Of course, there is also an exchange where required between the two, and as required, even to formulate the question, if need be. Now I'm going to the next slide and trying really to discuss how this system is working. I mean, I think we have been all engaging with this system, generally governments. When JECFA, GEMRA, JMPR puts something on its agenda, the main thing that these bodies will need is data. Because these bodies are not developing scientific assessments that are limited to one jurisdiction. They are developing scientific assessments that should be applicable for the global community. So they need data that is as representative as possible of the world. And their outputs will be as good as they receive data. So essentially, if we keep the same countries giving data, United States, Canada, Europe, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, you will have assessments that reflect United States, Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan. So if some parts of the world like Africa are not represented, if some Asian countries are not well represented, if the Near East is not well represented, whether be it in the food consumption patterns, in the production patterns, in the occurrence information, we will not have representative scientific assessments. So the requirement of engagement are important, but in this case, it's not necessarily on these bodies. It's really on those who interact with these bodies to be able to provide that information. Of course, questions remains as to once these assessments are out there, do they address everybody's needs? In other words, first of all, is there a capacity to use the assessment and to translate them into what you want as a country, whether be it United Arab Emirates, whether be it a specific country in Asia, etc. So essentially, how do we relate to the output of that scientific assessment? There's also another question about addressing countries' needs. If we look, for example, at the agenda of JMPR, well, there are far more pesticides that are being used in the world than what Codex is able to address, simply because JMPR is not able to address. And I can speak about this here now relating to my Canadian belonging. At some point, Canada being a big agricultural producer, and particularly producing some crops where we produce far more than what we consume, therefore we need to export, we were using pesticides in, for example, pulses, for which Codex did not make decisions. So one of the things that Canada did at some point, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Moez, is that we funded, when I say we, I mean the Canadian government, funded an extra session of JMPR simply to be able to fast track the process. Not to try to influence the system, because obviously they just provide the funds and then it's FAO, WHO that administers that. And it's not even for Canada to develop the priorities. The priorities are developed within CCPR. Okay? But really to fast track the process. That was the only way that one country needed. So you see, there is a question is the system addressing the needs of the countries? Or, in fact, for that matter, when we say for the countries, of the regulated industries. So, for example, right now we have so many innovations, whether be it in food contact materials, in new methods of production. So, for example, the cellular agriculture, etc. There was some responsiveness from these bodies, but again, is that enough? And would we be able to address all the needs of the future, considering that the innovation is actually kind of exponential when you see how things is going, whereas the resources for these bodies tend to be more linear, if at all. If at all, when I say linear, doesn't mean even that there is a good slope of growth. So there is even a question about the slope that exists, and actually even the direction of that slope, going up or going down potentially, of the funding that is available. So questions really emerge about the sustainability of resources. Now, and I will finish essentially this part, at least of the discussion, for setting the scene here, about what are our responsibilities as a collective community in food regulatory science. And in fact, that was one of the reasons we created G-Force in the first place. One of our first objectives was to contribute to the availabilities of competencies. You will not be able to conduct scientific assessments unless you have competencies that do that. I mean, even if you want to use artificial intelligence, which is the question of the day, you still need people that are able to pilot the artificial intelligence. You still need human intelligence before, you domesticate the artificial part. So you still need competencies. You also need data. And you need to support countries or stakeholders to generate the data. You need also knowledge dissemination forums such as this one. And that was one of the missions that we have given to ourselves, is really the contribution to some aspects of knowledge generation, meaning data availability, some aspects of the knowledge dissemination, and in the knowledge dissemination, it's really the capacity building part, the competency development, but also the creation of these networks, the creation of these fora that would allow the exchange of information in food regulatory science. But again, we all acknowledge that despite every effort that we have, and despite also the efforts of our partners, that the needs far exceed what we are doing and what we are delivering. And I guess in the rest of the discussion, we would like to see now what else is out there that complements what we are doing, but also to discuss what else we ought to do, or what else we ought to imagine in order to address the increasing needs. That's my part of starting really the discussion here. Maybe I'll pause a little bit and maybe ask a few questions. Sometimes if you're asking a few questions that might be coming with another, in another area of the discussion, we might park it and actually take care of it in the subsequent steps of this dialogue. Now, stop the monologue and open the dialogue. Reactions. So I'm going to ask actually colleagues in the room if we can get the microphones. We don't have many, so we're going to, our colleague. Yeah, but actually, given that we are broadcasting, we will lose your voice there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everybody. I just want to share with you a question that I was asking myself. What can be the impact of AI in the field of risk assessment? Can we, for example, use it for prediction of risks with the number of data that can be collected? And my question is, can we use AI for prediction of risk and not only use it for performing on analysis of risk assessment? Thank you.
Thank you. If you would like to start answering that, yeah, why not? Please.
Good morning. Thank you for this question, interesting question. I think there's difference between the tools and the objective. The objective remains the same when you are doing risk assessment is to better understand how the risk occurs and to be predictive as well. So AI can be one tool that can be used within the risk assessment. So AI will not change the way, completely the way, the objective to understand, to better understand that to have a predictive, and AI can be used as well to to be more efficient in some part of the work done in risk assessment. And as we said, risk assessment is scientific based. We need to look at all the available studies, looking at all the available data. And when you are screening the number of scientific papers, sometimes you end up with 3,000, 10,000, depending on the subject. So AI can be very useful to select the relevant studies. It can be, so for the selection of the study, it's working very well. Now, when we want to extract from the papers the needed information, there's some try, but they are not very accurate for the moment. So I will be back to what Samuel said at the beginning. It's not a matter of tools, AI or risk assessment, because you need data. So for them, first of all, what we need to do, and that's why the risk analysis paradigm that we are using in Codex Alimentarius, saying we have risk management, risk assessment, and risk communication. But I think we need to innovate or modernize this risk analysis principle and focus mainly about the decision. What we want to do, what is the problem, and bring all the stakeholders together to understand the issue and to understand the decision context. And that's why when we say sometimes it's difficult in the Codex Alimentarius and sometimes it's difficult to WHO and FIU to review the relevance of the requested risk assessment. Do we need them really or not? And that's why it's very important that the competencies is not only for risk assessment, but as well to understand the issue, understand the problem. And once we understand the problem, you can see what we can use as tool. We can go to regular risk assessment through GECFA, GMPR, GEMNU, or GEMRA, or we can do something more sophisticated using AI or whatever it is. So everything is possible, but when we have a good idea about what we want to achieve, it will be better.
So I'll just add a little bit to that question about can we use AI, and I think the answer inevitably eventually is going to be yes. And we can already see that it does extraordinary things that otherwise would take hours or weeks or months, and then all of a sudden you have data which you didn't know existed. You ask it for references, it provides them, and so on. And then it proceeds to do all sorts of extraordinary things and then make extraordinary errors. So just as an example, there's a tiny little error, which is incredibly important, and then a very big error, which is also important. We asked it to tell us how to do risk assessment as though we had no idea. And it gave some advice, 95% correct, and then 5% wrong. But 5% wrong is just enough to be therefore completely wrong. And just as an example, because as it's reading the literature on risk assessment, it's seeing examples of people dividing a mass of a contaminant by the body weight of the consumer. Makes sense, right? We do that a lot. But then they did it to a microbial hazard. And no one has ever done that in the history of microbial risk assessment, is divide that by a 70 kilogram body weight. And so the AI just simply it is not relevant to infections. So that's an example of a small error. But if you applied that, if you followed the advice of the AI, you would be 100% wrong. Okay? Then it does something completely different, which is it completely blurs and stampedes over the line between risk assessment and risk management. So it'll tell you that the best estimate of prevalence of this is of a microbial hazard in a food, for example, might be 2%. And it says, and by the way, that's a very low percentage. It just decides. And it doesn't matter if this is a food that's ready to eat, or it's going into the mouth of children, or someone very elderly. It just says it's very low. Don't worry about this. So it doesn't know the fence lines. It doesn't follow any of the strictures that we usually apply in science. So that's just my warning. But it's coming, and it's going to do great things after it does some errors. Yeah.
So I guess maybe really to complement this and put it in our context, it's probably one of the resources that we will be relying upon and actually contributing to the solution. But it will never be the solution. Because again, I think data is needed. AI will not generate data. You know, AI will not be telling us, you know, what is in our food. And AI will not also be telling us what we are consuming, amongst other things. So few things that will still need to be provided. And again, of course, the human competency will still need to be there just to be able, at the very least, to spot these things and to try to steer them in the right direction so that it becomes more performing and therefore essentially even more resourceful in what we want to do. Another intervention here, yes, please.
Good morning, and thank you, Sam. Thank you for everything. It's not more of the question, is more like emphasizing on what you were saying. Just to give an example on the importance of collecting data and engaging with these international bodies that Sam was talking about. The example that happened last year with the Syrian Republic of Syria with the problem of the olive oil. There were lack of information, lack of data from the Syrian Republic have resulted in a standard, an international standard that in a way take off the Syrian olive oil from the international world, from the international trade. It will be considered as non-version or non-authentic. So that's why Syria have a problem, because they did not give a data of their olive oil. Now, the reason why it's obvious, but that's the way it is. Now, what Syria did, and they're working with international organizations. They start to connecting. That was the problem, and the solution was to connect to start to working with FAO. They're working with G-Force as well to collect data about the olive oil, and eventually they were gonna solve the solution. So just emphasizing the importance of sending the data of not only the quote unquote the developed country, but also the developing country, and try to engage with these international organizations or international bodies. It's essential to not be excluded from the trade and from the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, actually, Hadi. Yeah, absolutely. The critical importance of being able to provide data. Otherwise, I mean, again, in this case, it was not a risk situation, it is a quality situation, but nonetheless, it is important enough that it can basically exclude a complete, country from trade, potentially. Hopefully now that is being overcome, and of course, I mean, we know, as Dr. Hadi mentioned, in terms of the reasons why Syria went through a traumatic period of its history, that impacted everything, including the availability or the ability even to contribute with data, and hopefully now that will be overcome, and we wish, in fact, our Syrian colleagues better days ahead and a complete, and continued contribution to the international processes. Ladies first, so let's.
Thanks, Dr. Sam. A quick question regarding the crisis management. When time is the most critical part, when something like erythrocene, what happened, and it will continue to happen in different topics. How can we see how we can have a cross-border collaboration between countries so we can ensure there's a structure well structured to ensure rapid risk assessment and decision making, especially that it's going to happen across countries, especially developing countries when they look what's happening outside and just sometimes they copycat what is happening. So how we can ensure a well-structured collaboration across them. Thank you.
So thank you, Heidi. I guess if I try to also maybe paraphrase your question, and I will actually pose it to my colleagues, you know, not to try to get the answer myself. So essentially, you're asking about systems really to address, you know, these emerging issues where a country decides to decides a regulatory decision that is a unilateral decision, trying to understand the underpinning of that decision and looking at the ramifications of that, whether be it from a scientific standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, etc. And what are the mechanisms in place that could help be more effective in doing that? I don't know if anybody would like to address that.
I think it's time to start. I think it's time to start with mapping the existing mechanism that we have in place and actors. So if you allow me, I'll stand because I need to be close to the audience because everybody should be a contributor.
So for colleagues, if you have another question, we'll take it in the next wave. Sorry. Just, okay, thank you.
And I think if you have not only questions, but with a reply should be as well active, because not all the replies should come from the panel, but I think everyone should contribute. And therefore is a global goal to reach an integrated global food safety landscape. So I think what I would like to bring here is, first we need to map what we have available. So we would like to design a future, and the question is this current situation? I see there are a lot of problems, a lot of questions. It relates to data, people, methodology, tools, regulatory framework, so there are many aspects that we can consider. The question is, who is acting globally? So we just heard about Codex, G-Force, I mentioned Ilmerak. Maybe there are also other actors acting. And I'll be very pleased if you just stand and mention it's still someone acting globally. Of course, there are interactions between national, regional, global, so this is like a chain reaction. Each of us has a function, but we cannot focus on everything, and I think at this level we'll focus on who is acting globally. We'll focus on our strength, so what these global actors are intended to deliver and what they have delivered, because I think a positive message should come out. I think it's very important to define what are the global expectations. So if we say integrated global food safety landscape, what this means? We are looking to deliver outputs, scientific outputs. So which are these potential ways how we deliver outputs today? We mentioned a few, but I think there are many ways of doing things, including the help of new technologies to deliver in the future. But last, although it looks like negative, this is not negative. So we have to learn as well from difficulties that these global actors are facing, because this might be an opportunity. We just mentioned Codex and what Codex has delivered, and I think no one is doubting that in the backbone of global food safety and governance, we have Codex, which translate the scientific knowledge into actionable and harmonized standards. However, all of us agree from the discussions that we had up to now that we didn't yet reached or realized this integrated landscape that we wanted. We just mentioned the international working groups delivering scientific assessment, and it seems that there is a gap somewhere because we cannot cope with the need. And my question is, we know that from a resource and political perspective, Codex rely on the voluntary participation of the countries. So it's very clear that not all the countries can engage with the same extent because of resources, budget, other trade disputes or difficulties. So my question would be, what it could help in this interaction between countries and codex to reach a more harmonized, at least regulatory framework, because we know that we are approaching a situation where also the regulatory landscape shows diversity. What is your opinion? I look first to the panel members. So, Moet, do you want to?
Yeah, I can start. Thank you, thank you. So your question, how to we can work better together. So I can cite the example of Codex Alimentarius when we start to when we have new work, and this is one of the problem in Codex on how to decide to start a new work, and usually is made through one country or several countries. They sit together, they start to what we call it discussion paper, so they can summarize what is known, what is unknown. So in depending on the Codex committees, for example, in CCFH, we call it risk profiling. It has a name. There is a sort of standard how to do it. But I think it's not enough, because what we are seeing sometimes is not so clear. When we start to think about standards, we start a new work because we have an issue. But Codex is not there only to solve the scientific issue or to solve the absence of knowledge or gap of knowledge, but the role of Codex is to end up with the standards, global standards. So what is missing in those discussion paper is the need. Is there really a need for global standard? And understand exactly when we mobilize different resources, because when we started the new standards, we ask FAO and WHO expert bodies to do some work. Sometimes we have all the available data. We can program the work in GECFA or GMPR. But if it is a new issue, like a new food, novel food, cell-based food, is something completely new. And the mechanism that we have in GECFA, for example, GECFA is very, very, very standardized risk assessment. The question is known. And that's why it's very important to understand in Codex there's different type of standard that we can develop. There is the numerical standards, like maximum levels, MRLs, are very easy to understand. So what we have a pesticide. For the management of the pesticide, we need MRLs. So here is very, very clear. The question that comes to GMPR is very clear. From FAO side, they have the group. They need to look at the residues, understand the residues, understand the metabolism in the plant or the metabolism in the animal. From the other way, from WHO, we need to understand the toxicology. So those ones are very clear, very straightforward. But now when it comes to new problem, challenging problem with new technology, new system, production system, the expert bodies that we develop are not designed to answer to those questions. And that's why before we bring some question about novel foods, cell-based foods, we need the subject to be mature. And to make those subjects mature, we need to do some scientific work or some consultation work. And it can be done by FAO and WHO through ad hoc expert meetings, so we have expert consultation. But it can be as well done by countries or by network, like in MIRAC, for example, you start to think about NAMS, new approach methodology. So do we still need to have animal experimentation to evaluate the toxicology of some substance in food? Yes and no, so we can have a good discussion. But what we need after that is how to bring that to the Codex, and what will be the impact in Codex, and what will be the role of Codex to see we embrace the use of new technology in risk assessment, what we call risk assessment policy, which is not enough developed. Last 2 weeks I was in Singapore talking about novel foods, and we have a nice network from different countries, and it was very difficult to understand the data requirements for the safety evaluation of novel food. They are very different. So that's why creating those collaboration before Codex that we can discuss in different dimension, because starting to think and develop idea with 190 countries members is very, very difficult. And you have this formal mechanism of the discussion. So what we need is some pre-work done by a group like G-Force or other group or other network that start to think about the problem, make it mature, and understand what is expected from the Codex, what we ask Codex. Do we need the standards? Do we need the risk assessment policy? Do we need the data requirements, harmonization between the countries? So this is kind of thing that we need to do, but we cannot do it in the current setting within the Codex Alimentaris.
Thank you very much. What I hear is that we have still regulatory philosophies that are different, and they can slow harmonization. So fragmentation rather than fully harmonized regulation, this is the situation. How can we help? Who could help? What do you think?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Stephen O'Rourke is my name. I work in regulatory and mainly from the startup perspective. This is why it's really brilliant to hear you talking about novel foods, because in this situation we have a lot of unclarity. And I think this is one of the big issues, the uncertainty when a startup is developing a new product, a new novel product. What do I need to do? What do I need to give you? And what data do you want? So you mentioned Singapore as well, brilliant example. And there's two words that I'll talk tomorrow about it. I hope to see you all there. But there's two words: regulatory sandbox. And this is an environment where you can test your product before it goes through to the full evaluation of full approval. So I think Singapore is doing really amazing work in this field. And also in the UK, they also have a regulatory sandbox model that they're piloting at the moment. So I think, to answer your question more directly, I think this is what we're missing: the uncertainty, bringing all of the players to the table so that we can all speak openly about what's required. And I think the sandbox is a big way towards that. Thanks.
Perhaps actually maybe to add quickly on this, that we have a session that is dedicated to the way to manage innovation tomorrow. So hopefully it's not intersecting with your session, and that we'll be able to see each other's discussions. And I believe we will have also a presentation from Singapore just to showcase the Singapore food story, as they call it actually. So.
Thank you very much. I'm looking to the audience if you have any other input regarding the regulatory framework. So I think everybody is looking to risk analysis, but how we implement this in our countries and how this impacts then the global cooperation. This is an important issue that we have to consider when we talk on a fully integrated global food safety systems, because country to country we have different systems that is very difficult to compare, to connect, bring together. And I think this is something that I see that you are willing again to talk.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm because basically, yeah, that's a problem, that I have sometimes when there are some ideas, potentially also that address some of the questions that were posed. I think again, to a number of the challenges that were mentioned, regulatory cooperation is really needed. When it comes to innovation, one would argue, does it require that for each innovative product, I have a safety assessment done in Singapore, another one done in Malaysia, another one done in the UAE, another one done in the US, and another one done somewhere else? We know that requiring that to be done at an international level, as Moaz mentioned, it's very tough really to put it into the Codex system. And maybe at some point putting it in the Codex system will be needed, but at the beginning it may not be required. And frankly, That's not what Codex was set for initially, really, to address all the emerging issues in this fashion. But would there be a system that we consider that produces these safety assessments or these answers to the regulatory questions of market access in a manner that would create economies of scale both to regulators and to industry, but at the same time that does not undermine the confidence of consumers in the robustness of the assessment that will be resulting? So those are some of the questions maybe that we would like to see. What are the mechanisms that we could put in place that could enable such regulatory cooperation?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to say a few words about Codex. My name is Betül Vazgeçer, as a role of Codex Alimentaris Commission. Yes, Codex is a very good platform, intergovernmental platform, and then sharing all knowledge coming from the members. And also, the Codex also have some observers. And then I would like to underline the what about the priority of the members, because Codex recognized as a reference for WTO, and then during the working under the Codex or preparing some, adopting some international recognizing Codex standard, you should find a balance between human health and the fair trade practices. And it means that we should encourage members to share their data, share their problems. If you think about, for example, you give an example from the novel foods, some part of the world is thinking or working for, about novel foods, but the other part, for example, need a guidelines or need a reference for food hygiene, for example, street vended foods. It's an example. And you should find the balance between these two needs and the priorities of the countries. So, first of all, it's a good platform, intergovernmental platform. And then first of all, we should encourage all members, all countries, under the Codex, we should encourage all members to put the, first of all, not problem, but put the priorities on the table. And then data, and then we need data, we need risk assessment, and then we also use our resources because we share same resources because we are living in one world, and then we should respectful for our resources. If there's the risk assessment, same issue, why we can repeat same assessment. And then if we share data, and also it's my observer, I'm sure the private sector has lots of data, and then we should share just together with the national authority and the private sectors, and we should share our data and knowledge, and then it will help to encourage our system. Thank you very much.
I thank you, but please keep the microphone,
Yeah, of course.
because now we are looking to find solutions. So if you say we have to encourage, who concretely? Because we are looking for some actors that should take this responsibility, would like to share. Codex is trying, and we know that member states or participants are trying to implement it, depending on their resources. They try to adapt and take decision on what is available, but it remains still a big constraint. If all of us would act differently, I think it's very difficult to reach this point. Therefore, we need to give a key message to someone, to the governments or to new organizations. We need new approaches, how to share the data. Do you have any idea how we can do it? Who? The change are ourselves. Yeah, please feel free.
Thank you. Sorry to come back again. Just going back to the question said by the gentleman regarding the innovation and novel foods. I believe, and we have official from WHO, from Codex. I don't know if we have someone from FAO. We have a very good platform regarding the GM food platform, which is from the FAO and from FAO, and it have very good information that is used from countries all over the world. We in Libya personally rely on that platform regarding the GM's food. So and there is also the GEMS platform on that's used internationally on risk assessment to collect data, etc. So why don't we have a platform regarding innovation and novel foods that, you know, instead of having one country that do the risk assessment on its own and have its own information, put it in that platform, and whoever country needs to use it can rely on that. So that's basically just an idea to have a platform, and international organization can support it.
And I would like, in this context, just to ask Samuel, because you mentioned GeForce and data, maybe you can add something to this proposal.
Actually, again, now, of course, the world of novel food is a vast world. You know, like there are so many categories of novel foods. And I guess, you know, the example that was given by Hadi is quite illustrative. I mean, that is a category of innovation, which is food derived from biotechnology. And there the solution was, at the international level, that we all have international guidance for risk assessment. That's what Codex did. And that's what essentially 2 ad hoc intergovernmental task forces did. They generated the guidelines. But then there was a decision to say, well, we stop there. We're not going to be assessing one by one all the applications of industry because it's not feasible, it's not sustainable. So what was imagined, which I think needs to be thought of in order to be replicated in other areas, was a platform of information sharing. So one could argue that for particular areas of innovation, where essentially the industry identifies a sector. So I'm going to take an example, functional ingredients. So ingredients that either, for example, being extracted from traditional agriculture, herbs, elements that have a functionality either as a novel ingredient for themselves, or they may be a traditional ingredient, but we discovered a function that we would like to make a claim about. Again, there might be guidelines that already exist, and for example, for claims, Codex has come up with guidelines that could be relied upon, or at least could be a starting point. But then, I think there might be discussions to be had about what are the platforms or the mechanisms that we could use to have joint assessments. So, and who could do these joint assessments, with what collaboration, with what data, under what mechanisms, to ensure again that the trustworthiness remains, the reliability remains, the recognition as well is there, and then a mechanism for sharing. And the question also could be asked that can be done or could be considered both regionally and globally, because there might be some regional needs. You know, in Asia, there are diets that are different that what you can see in North America or in Latin America and the Caribbean, and vice versa. So those are some ideas that could be, you know, considered. But again, I mean, we're going to go back to this. This cannot happen without a coalition of the willing, those who are willing, and of course, when you are willing, you need to invest. There is a collective investment that needs to be made.
And I have just a question: who can give such a mandate? The regions, the governments? Because we have to look in the whole process, how it starts, and who will initiate exactly this need.
I think actually we should empower ourselves.
No, if we go to this direction, we are recreating Codex, we are recreating what is WHO is, what is. I think what we need today with the rapid change is that we need to create something more flexible, more agile, not completely formal, to repeat what is the setting of Codex Alimentarius. What we need is to bring people together. if 3 countries are interested by the same subject, they have the same issue, why continue to do 3 different risk assessments? Why we don't materialize our resources and make it stronger? And we share scientists, we share data, we share resources, and with the ambition not only to solve the problem of the 3 countries, but if you have at least 3 countries interested on an issue, in doing so, they open the possibility that this risk assessment become global. And it will be easier after that to be taken by WHO, FAO, or taken by the Codex if there is a need to go for international decision or international accommodation or international. So what we need is not creating something very rigid, something very flexible. You are in, out, depending on your your needs or objective or agenda. And one of the issue, I had some discussion with France, and because I'm working in WHO, and WHO, you know, the conflict of interest is very, very important. So, but doesn't mean that we cannot talk to industry. And one of the issue of risk assessment, I'm not saying that in the risk assessment we will include experts or the risk assessment should be paid by the industry. But what we need, at least at the problem formulation, when exactly we need to understand, we don't, if you want to understand only from the perspective of public health, it's not enough. Because when you are talking now, that's why I'm pushing more than risk analysis, but looking at risk governance. When we are talking about risk governance, we need to include all the stakeholders, and we need to understand the perspective from the private sector, not include them to do risk assessment, because in this case it would be some issue about conflict of interest, but at least at the framing of the issue, and they can provide data. And this is very important to have them in board, because sharing data, when we are talking about data, gems, food, and so on, we are seeing, let's say, 1% on 1 out of 1,000 of the existing data. The private sector, they own more data than government owning. So if you want to bring those data, you need to bring the industry, understand what we want to do and what will be the objective of the analysis, how we will use the data, and in this case we can enrich and increase our capacity to have more accurate and more relevant risk assessments.
This is very interesting because it shows us that we need more flexibility on who gives the mandate and how these groups can be created, and also a flexible response, which it means also commitment to real data sharing for the purpose of this collaboration and a very quick response. We still recognize very hardly that the international expert working group, they will continue their work with all the limitations and difficulties, but we need also new models to approach in order to respond to the demands that we have at the moment. Is it any other issue? Because we just mentioned emerging risk or crisis, and I think the crisis issue is because we need sometimes also quick collaboration, real data transfer in order to identify where the issue is. Do you have any other ideas how to better respond? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much for a wonderful session. And as a private entity, it's very rare for us to get this opportunity. So thank you so much firstly for that. I would like to know, and I'm very, very curious to understand, are there any joint training programs? Are there any capacity building programs where, as a private entity, can we collaborate? Is there any opportunity where we can contribute? Because we do global audits, we do global trainings. So how does this information can be cascaded down? So I'm very, very curious to hear from all of you, and of course from everyone, if they have any opportunity or any platform such.
Let's create this opportunity. There's I don't think any obstacle that we develop training And in the same session, I did it before, and I remember in the same session, we have people from the government making decision, people from the industry, PhD student, professor.
Yeah.
And this is the beauty of some of the training workshop,
Right.
where we bring people from different perspective with different level of knowledge about risk assessment.
Absolutely.
And this kind of workshop are welcome, and we are in our project, we would like to develop that. And if you are interested, we can continue the discussion. And
I would love to do that. I would love to do that because I do global audits, and we do the audits of all scales of food industry, from the giants to very basic local sectors. So we would like to cascade this information, what beautiful work you all guys are doing. We want to take it to the people. We want to be the catalyst between you guys and, of course, to the current industry. So I would love to do that. And
So integrated landscape means integrate all actors together. And maybe I have as well an example that I would like to give. We just mentioned Ilmerak, where I am coming to you.
Thanks a lot. I think if we take a step back, we also should recognize that regulatory guidelines themselves are very political. So that's one answer why we don't have an overall global alliance, let's say. But I think this is a very good idea with, with people and our experiences in the one room. There's no reason why we can't put together some sort of pre-assessment workshop together where we go through what's required, and to prepare people. But that said, I think we also need to recognize the need to bring in the innovators. And the innovators are the startups who are working on these novel foods and new innovations. And the problem that I see in my work every day is that they're willing to talk, and they have a lot of people in their team who are willing to help, but the rules are just not really made for them. So I'm not trying to be controversial in saying that the rules are there for the big companies, but that's what we see day in, day out, that the startups, they feel a little bit left out. So I think that starts with regulatory education, showing these people in the companies that, hey, regulations, they might seem difficult and complicated at the beginning, but once you actually understand and once you recognize that aligning with the regulations helps your innovation get to market, then you're changing not only how people look at regulations, but you're also changing the culture. And if I could be so brave and point somebody out who's changing a lot of regulatory culture, is Andrew here? I'm helping you prepare for your talk tomorrow.
I appreciate being tipped in like that. Thanks, Stephen. I like the idea of collaboration, right? And ultimately, Steve and I will be talking about this tomorrow a lot more, is this concept of regulatory culture. Is it actually more standards, new rules, more scientific expertise that we need, or is it actually how we apply those rules and how we implement them as individual, regulators ourselves?
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sorry,
Andrew,
my apologies. My name's Andrew Wilson. I'm a recovering regulator. I've worked in regulatory science for 15 plus years. I'm now with Cultivate SA. I work with Dr. Lane Jesperson on global regulatory food safety culture, and specifically my area of expertise is around regulatory culture itself. What do we mean by that? It's really about, those things that affect behaviours when we implement regulation, and it's not necessarily about the science, as I said. It's really about how we take that and apply it on the ground. What is the mission that we're actually trying to achieve, and what are the roles in that mission? So from my perspective, it's industry and regulated entities generally have the responsibility to comply with the law and actually achieve the outcome of safe food. Regulators have the responsibility to verify that that occurs effectively. So when we go to this risk assessment concept, ultimately it is the risks. We can think about approaching it from a scientific perspective. I think we can collaborate definitely on those, but at the end of the day, how we implement them on the ground is what makes the difference. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk much more about that. I don't want to steal that focus from this session, but yeah, I think that regulatory culture is a major lever in that.
Thank you very much. We have a question from the left side, and I'm
Hello, Mary Meluz, Food Safety and Quality Microbiology Director at Ferrero. I would like to thank you all for this debate because it's very important that we identify all the stakeholders in action. I heard a lot. I mean, myself, I've been working in risk assessment from the scientific side first, and now I'm moving more to how to make it in operations. And I see a big gap. There is a big gap between risk assessment and risk management to start with, because we have a lot of tools. Sometimes they can be very simple, sometimes they can be very complicated in risk assessment, but in risk management, how to apply it, how to bring it to the factory shop floor, there is almost nothing. There is the famous matrix of likelihood and severity that leads you to very inaccurate, sometimes results, not to be more skeptical about this tool, but in fact there is a big gap. And my observation is that science goes faster and faster and more complex, which is in a way good because we need fundamental science, but we also need applications. And in fact, capability buildings, we started to talk about that, is essential, but it's not done, it's not cascaded. I'm very happy also to hear that, Sarah, there are some people from auditing that are here, because this is in fact what is the requirement. It goes through those certification schemes. So we need to work hand in hand between regulatory, also the industry. Frameworks can be put in place to avoid conflict of interest, but there are also scientists in the private sector, and I believe they can bring an interesting perspective to make things really applied and useful, because sometimes we have some proposals for interventions that we struggle to even think about how to apply them. So very happy that this debate started and happy to be in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we need as well more capacity building to understand our regulatory framework and how this is applied globally. I had here a contribution. Please.
Hi, my name is Eliane. I'm a quality assurance manager in a company that has almost like 100 restaurants in UAE, KSA, GCC, Kuwait, Qatar, London as well. I have almost 10 food safety manuals, one for each country. As she mentioned now, I have almost like 5,000 employees that I'm supposed to take all these regulations and implement on the floor, which, as just mentioned, is not the reality. Like, I take studies, documentations, papers. I'm coming from a scientific background as well, and I have to translate it into day-to-day activities, movement of employees from one place to the other, and like to this extent. And this, I think, is becoming a struggle with 10 food safety manuals, not being able to implement it. The board thinks I'm against reducing waste, I'm against cost control, and this is creating a lot of hassle for us. So I think who needs to give you the information? It's the private sector before anyone. Even a basic employee can be a source of information. And this is where us as like really people in the restaurants, we take information from our employees. So a bank of information should be there, and AI should help us in sorting these informations. And this is how things should work, I think, from my opinion.
Thank you very much. I have, just a second. I have a contribution because we talk about how to engage with industry capacity building. And I mentioned today that we have as well a liaison group on chemicals for risk assessment, and maybe the scientific coordinator is here and can give us an example.
Thank you so much, Melinda, and also the panelists. Great discussions. I just want to echo what has been said earlier. There is a huge gap between risk assessors and risk managers that needs to be bridged. We've had these discussions at ILMIRAC meetings just a month ago when we met at WHO. It was the annual meeting dedicated to resolving or trying to create synergies on how we work without duplicating that work, you know, a question that just belongs to this kind of domain. So the essential comment that I want to make here is the risk assessor's advice that is being made, it ultimately has the goal of informing risk managers and informing decision makers. So to keep pace with that, we need to be sure that in this fast-paced world that we live in, we need to really align with the speed that's where information is flowing, where risk assessment happens, and where we deliver on that risk assessment. That's one. And the second observation, or rather a comment I'd like to make to introduce you to Ilmeric, so just maybe a couple of words. At Ilmeric, we unite 30-plus agencies, risk assessment agencies, national agencies from all over the world, but also intergovernmental organizations such as WHO, FAO, OECD, etc. So what we started doing earlier this year, is to reinforce capacity building, to open up the dialogue. We launched an expert dialogues online event series where everybody's welcome to join. The events are open to expert public because we aim at really delving into detail when we discuss a topic, to have an open dialogue also with I'd say companies, industry, because what we're interested in is not only exchanging the data, but moving the topics and so far that we can actually act on them. Thank you.
And all these topics, we just piloted this here, were innovative topics like artificial intelligence and use and risk assessment. Then probabilistic risk assessment, it was also another data integration. So I think more topics we identify, then we'll find better solutions. And I think we have a lot of examples. The question is how to integrate what is best. I think I had a contribution, yes.
Thank you so much. Just I echo my colleagues for what they have mentioned, but I think to develop like a synergism mechanism or a platform between all the stakeholders, we can think about like a tier-based, how call for collaboration to start from like the competent authorities, even through the focal points for codex and so on, then how they can coordinate even on the regional basis. Then we can move to the tier 2, how to can engage other stakeholders like the multinationals or the private sectors. Because this will be very supportive, as all of us now is speaking about stakeholders interaction era. I have an example in Egypt, for example. We are working to submit some due diligence to the DG Santé in the EU to access market for some certain products. So working through the umbrella, one of the umbrella for the food sector, which is Egypt Food Export Council, we have invited all of the multinationals who are interested in this market. Then we discussed why we are working to duplicate our efforts, as Mu'taz said, for example, Mu'azzez said, sorry. This is very important for better resources mobilization, which all of the multinational and all of us are thinking about, how to are thinking about better resources mobilization. So we don't need to duplicate our efforts. So through this umbrella, all of these multinationals have been collaborated to support this project. At the end, we have submitted our due diligence to the EU market to access this market. After that, each one of them already has the responsibility to lead the market or based on his competitiveness. But it's time now to think about how we can engage all stakeholders for better resources mobilization, and then you can compete, you can lead the market after that. So it's the role of all, starting from tier 1, competent authority, then the coordinators or the regional focal points, and then the private sector and the trade service institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tiered approach, I think this is new mechanism of engaging. Moez, because slowly I have to close, so.
I want to react to something very important. I believe it's very important because we have different perspective and different needs for risk assessment and for regulation and for standards. Codex Alimentarius is looking at very high level. We are not talking to day-to-day risk manager. We are talking to the one sitting in the desk that are not at the front, because I believe that food safety is done by the industry because you are producing the foods, and we need to address your needs. So at Codex Alimentarius, we do it at high level, maximum level, MRLs. We provide some different numerical standards, labeling, and so on. But we are setting those standards as an objective. and how to reach those objectives. And this, I understand what you, because when I start my first modeling, doing quantitative risk assessment, I started working with the employers. I want to do the cheese making. Stay weeks, days to understand the processing, collecting the data, and when we are producing, I produce a model, it fits the purpose. So how we can help, because each plant is different. So what if I put a model for one type of cheese with a certain organization, you can have a nice model. I call it quantitative HAZAP approach. Is bring us up from qualitative to more quantitative approach. And it was part of FISMA approach is to propose this sort of predictive modeling at plant level. But what we can do is how to help you, for example, when you look at the majority of the outbreaks and recalls that we observed last 3-4 years, the majority of the source of the contamination is the environmental of the plant, the processing plant. And how we can, and when I look at the codex, it's not helping you. Yeah, it's a different mandate. So how, for example, we can use a very sophisticated model, we call it agent-based model, like Cornell, they developed this kind of model, very sophisticated. We can use AI, we can use all the information coming from all the workers in the plants and help you to understand where to sample, which type of decision depending on the results. Because one of the problems with the environmental contamination and what happened in infant formulas, that the guy who is responsible, he found a positive salmonella, and he said, or whatever it is, I said, okay, what can I do? If I communicate that to my boss, I will be blamed. So what happens? No decision was made. No decision was made. At the end of the day, we have the outbreak, we have all these international recalls. So I think there's two types of risk assessment that we can help at regulation level, but day to day, I think there's a lot to learn, and there's different type of risk assessment that need to be developed.
Thank you very much. Now I am slowly closing with some conclusions. So we need new multi-stakeholder thinking, where everybody is included from regulatory framework until the results of outputs. We need more environments for data sharing. It's not so easy to continue with these voluntary contributions because, yeah, somewhere you reach the limitation, so we need some other forms of collaboration. We need clearly to define outputs, and maybe also a tiered approach can be thought how to approach such situations. And yes, let's work on how to create real interfaces between what is needed and translate them to policy decisions. And I think we can continue the next days, and I'll give the floor now to my colleagues. Thank you for all the contributions up to now.
Thank you for that. I guess actually we're going to give the phone to Moez. So, because basically right now, after reviewing the landscape, after discussing some of the opportunities, we're going to be maybe zeroing in on one that has been identified, and I'm going to give Moez the floor to introduce it.
Now it's working. Okay. So let's start with the situation today. So we know that the global food system is changing faster than the traditional risk assessment process cannot keep up. So there's a new technology, there's a new demands, new exposure pathways, but the capacity to evaluate them is not equal across region. And from my perspective, I worked in with IFSA as expert of the panel. I see that they have a lot of resources. I collaborate, I work with FDA. They have a different way to do risk assessments. But what we are, and the collaboration with our agencies, and the current situation that we don't have the same capacity in different regions to do full risk assessments. And I see, for example, in FDA, in chemical risk assessment, I remember there is only 2 persons, 2 persons dealing with chemical risk assessment in FDA. You cannot imagine that. In WHO and FAO, when I look at the number of scientists that are able to do risk assessment, when I sum the 2 groups, it's no more than 8 scientists with all the demands. So that's why we are looking at this IFORAC, International Food Risk Assessment Consortium, that we need, why we are developing this, why we are developing this consortium, because if you go next, please, I cannot see the same. We don't have the same. In,
there is a time lag.
Ah, okay. Okay, so next, please. No, I have to wait here. Okay, okay, that's it. Yeah, I can stand. I can stand this much easier. So what we try to do is not to replace what is existing today, but to try to propose something that we can facilitate, solving some issue like novel foods, which framework, risk assessment framework we can use. In such demands, for example, bisphenol A, and one example, we have different risk assessments, how we can solve the issue, find the consensus between the different risk assessors. There's a new subject that need to be addressed, and I give you an example for GMPR. You cite the example of GMPR, the Joint Meeting for Pesticide Residues. The joint meeting on pesticide residues. Okay, thank you. We have a huge backlog. Yeah, the list, priority list is so huge, and we don't have the capacity to do it. And working and managing this GMPR, when I looking what they are doing, they take pesticides that are assessed by different countries, and they start from A to Z, looking at all the toxicological data, so repeating what is done 3 times by other countries. And this is one of the problems. And why we are repeating, and we spend a lot of resources, and we have very dedicated experts, and one of them is here, like Mark, and I cannot stop thanking them because they are working for free. Yeah, you are not paid, and they come to a meeting for 1 week meeting, so we pay them the travel, of course. But they spend hours and hours, their own time, to prepare the meeting. We have monographers that they write all the monographs. So I don't think that this system is sustainable, and we cannot continue this way. One of the options is to have different consortiums that are able to do this background work, and JECFA and GMPR will be mainly a reviewer to validate what is done. This is another model that we can propose to speed up the system. So in international food, so this is a new way to do risk assessment. We try to make it open, connected, data-driven, and so on. So next, please. So why I try to, when you start a new project, we say what is the pain today? What is the problem? Huh? The pain is here. You can all understand. Capacity of FAO, WHO, and all the risk assessment in different countries are not raising, but the requests, we have more requests, and we have less resources for risk assessment in everywhere. Second, the problem that when you ask the question, and for example, you have a novel food, you send your dossier to EFSA, you need 4 years to have the reply. Doesn't make sense. So how we can do it faster, timeless. Third, I'm very, very sensitive to that because when I participate to a lot of Codex committees, and they see the participation of the different countries. The participation is not equal. We see that, like a game, there are many watching a game. There's 4 players in average. And the low and middle income countries, they are not contributing to the discussion. So what we need a huge capacity building that we involve them in risk assessment. They understand what is science is telling them, and they understand the process of standards. And you are doing a lot of work in the G-Force to bring more delegation, well-prepared delegation to contribute to this discussion. So another thing is fragmented data and methodology is very known. And outdated tools. Should we continue to rely on animal experimentation? We need to use NAMs, for example. We need to use AI. We need to use probabilistic risk assessment and not continue to the low, high, medium. And, and what is, if I multiply low by medium, what will be? Sometimes I see low by high. If I say low and high, what will be the results from you? Why high? If you multiply 2 numbers less than 1, if you multiply 2 probabilities, the high will be with another probability, the high will be lower. So mathematically, when you do just a multiplication, elementary multiplication is wrong. It's completely wrong. And you can't believe me, but I did a lot of work to understand those qualitative approach that are used everywhere. And at the end of the day, it's like you random. It is a random decision. So be careful. So that's why we need to use the up-to-date, and we have a lot of possibility today. We can collect data using AI, using sensor. We have new methodology, whole genome sequencing, all those data, but they need to be used together. So this is the complexity. We have more complex data. We need to use more complex analysis of the data. And duplication. Duplication is one of the problems. So how to avoid duplication and repeat the same risk assessment in different countries. And something very important is transparency. How we harmonize the workflow, open data, explain the real objective of our risk assessment, because we have this societal demand. We are not living at the same time. The public need to understand. They need transparency about our evaluation and about our decision. So this is the pain. If you have any question, and or from the table and from the audience, if you have any reaction about if you agree or not with this context, and we can continue after that with the solution. Who want to jump? We want to add something?
Yeah, I want to react. I think your first pain point there was the capacity building, the insufficiency of capacity building. I just was realizing yesterday we did an event here yesterday on probabilistic risk assessment. It's a training event of sorts, and we realized that someone put up on the as a slide what the definition of risk analysis is for globally speaking in Codex, and what it didn't include in the definition was the processing of evidence. It says that you will gather robust evidence, but it doesn't admit to the fact that what you're mostly doing in risk assessment is processing evidence. And the things that you talked about, qualitative approaches, use of a risk matrix, et cetera, all of these things are just processing tools, and there's an enormous range of quality in terms of the practice. So one of the things that I think this collaborative really needs to focus on is coming up with the ultimate curriculum and also pointing out to the parts of the curriculum that we're not going to teach because they're bad. Like the sort of math that you just described, or other tools that are simply not functional, and actually acknowledge that not all risk assessments are created equal. The other thing that we need to do is make some choices as a collective, really, on what are the tools that we're going to use, because we can't train everybody on every tool. And part of the training that we did yesterday, I provided an example of one tool, and then another scientist showed that there are in fact 17 tools available to the community. And somebody quite legitimately asked, which one should we use? We don't actually have an answer. There's 17 tools available, and in fact, we ran out of time, and I didn't get a chance to introduce an 18th tool. So I think we need to sort this stuff out. And there's nobody who has that mandate to facilitate a consensus.
Yeah, for example,
WHO is not going to tell people what tool to use.
No, for example, WHO has the mandate for the ADI in chemical risk assessment. We have a database of ADI. So a lot of countries, they acceptable daily intake for chemicals. So it's a management tool. It's interesting to have it. But for example, for chemical risk assessment, there is no one who said, what are the dose response model that for microbiological hazards? No one is dealing saying, what is the dose response model for microbiological hazards? No one is doing that. So I think moving forward, we cannot create who will mandate. It will take a while. And sometimes we can start doing things, and after that we create the structure. So the InfoRack is intended to be very flexible to tool or an instrument that we can use, and bringing scientists, known scientists working together, trusted scientists, and we need, as you said, risk assessment or data processing need to be very transparent. It's transparency that will create the trust. And this is and with different example, with different outcomes, we can think about the structure. But if we wait that Codex or WHO or different country mandate or create a structure, it will take a decade before we arrive. So is there any reaction from the audience? Yes? Oh. Okay, ça marche.
I think, this is pain points in general in the world, not. But if we talk about our region, MENA region and Arab countries, I think we have to multiply by this point by 100. Because I remember in 2015, we started the project Food Safety in the Arab region. And when we were talking about risk assessment, I think maybe 2 or 3 countries has already institutions specialized in risk assessment, like GFTA, Jordanian Food and Drug Administration, SFDA. In Morocco, we started in 2016 with a small structure, maybe now 10%. If we compare to BFR, there are 600 scientists. So I think we are not at this level of pain. So what we can do is, I think G-Force is doing very good job with the webinars. We have to start with enhancing competencies in our region. With webinars, by sharing, for example, what we have received from North, from Germany, from other countries, because we are trying to do this with, in German there are BFR and there are BVL, who is in charge of risk management. So we received a lot of cooperation and good projects that we want to share them with the other countries of Africa. So we are now trying to réfléchir, to think how to do it.
Okay.
Maybe,
I think, thank you very much. Of course, we are not starting from the same point, and I think there's no competition between this initiative and GeForce. GeForce will continue to provide webinar, but we know that today, independently to the available structure in different developing countries, we need to tackle some issue, international problem, and we can bring, without having the structure, we can bring contributors from different countries, from countries they have the capacity and countries they don't have the capacity. And for me, training risk assessment, if you sit 1 week, 2 weeks, and train it to risk assessment, you will not become a risk assessor. Sorry. You can learn, you can understand concepts, but if you want to become risk assessor, you need to do risk assessment. So this way, capacity building that we want, if we, for example, tomorrow we said we will do salmonella in poultry because it is big issue everywhere. When we talk about capacity building, we bring participants from low and middle country, and we want them to own the risk assessments. They will be part of the risk assessment, and this is, I think, the best way to teach and to learn how to do risk assessment, not only training. Training are very, they're important, but they're not enough. Okay, so any other, or should we, because we are running out of time. So if next, please. Yeah. Quick reflection.
I mean, I have a question more on curiosity side. Since US has bit reduced on the funding to WHO, will this impact Codex risk assessment in any way?
Yes, it's impacted, of course. That's why we are looking at other solution, of course. So let's,
But just to add that, I mean, now we are looking bit of, private entity to fund WHO or Codex is not the conflict of interest, because just to get risk assessment of some ingredient, some funding has to go from the manufacturer or from the WBO.
Yeah,
it's something, I mean, just need to discuss.
Let's continue after that to see who can contribute to this this process and how we can manage those conflicts of interests, because they are very important. You are right to say that, and there is different mechanism on how to do that. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Deepan. I'm a risk consultant, trained as a quantitative risk assessor. Did a PhD, moved into industry as a consultant. For 3 years, I've not seen a single quantitative probabilistic risk assessment in my line of work. The one quantitative risk assessment that I did for a raw material being considered, the board's response was, can you please plot it in a 3x3 and show us if this is low, high, or medium? So while I totally understand the mathematical concepts that you're saying about multiplying a high and a low, what's the alternative? Because every single food safety program around the world is still on a 5x5 or a 3x3 matrix.
No, we can keep ourselves more optimistic, but if you want to be less optimistic, sometimes you say, if you want to change idea, change things, we need to kill one generation. but I think we can do something in between. Yeah, no, because sometimes, it's so the inerties that you are used. I remember I had a huge fighting with scientists and non-scientists about the use of quantitative approach. And one of very known scientists, I will not give his name, is saying, why we want us to change, Moise? We always did it in this way. Yeah, why you want to change? We are happy with that. So I think we need to change the mentality. There's some paradigm shifts that it is needed. I see you are here in different generation. You are younger than us, but today you are accepting AI. Who is not using AI? AI is based on probabilistic, approach. It is based on learning machine and very sophisticated, but it is a black box for you, you don't see it. But it's what you are doing in AI, we can do it for risk assessment, why not? But I understand that we are not doing in single, we said 100 restaurants. Yeah, we don't need one quantitative risk assessment per restaurant, but perhaps a consortium of company like you work together on main hazard, how to handle them, and you can do the common risk assessment, but after that, the recommendation can be applied one by one. The monitoring will be very specific, but the main outcome of risk assessment, they can be shared with different companies, not only for one single company. Yeah, so let's move fast because we are running out of time. So what are the solutions? So first, we have the problem of capacity. We want to expand global scientific capacity with a distributed, coordinated network of experts, so we can multiply our capacity on doing risk assessment. We can accelerate the delivery, because when you see the mechanism of how we are doing risk assessment in certain parts, it takes years. And the time scale of the manager is not the same time scale as academia. When you have a good question, you have a good contact with one professor, you say, wow, nice question, but I need to hire a PhD student. So the time to hire the PhD student, to have the funds, 4 years. To have your risk assessment model. And if I give the, so in your company, if you have a clear question, do you need 4 years to do risk assessment, full risk assessment?
I look at what the contract says.
So you can be fast, or you can take that. So this is the flexibility that we don't have with some institution. So so inequitable participation. This is the capacity building. We want to have the capacity building. So the capacity building, we are thinking that capacity building is only for low and middle income countries. It is not true. In the same country, you have private sector, government, scientists. So you have the diversity of between who knows and who don't know, a huge variety. So it is the same. And finding, having people who know very professional in risk assessment, you don't find it everywhere. So it's something that needed capacity building. I understand the capacity building for low middle income countries, but capacity building for private and for the government as well, risk manager. Fragmented evidence. So for example, in this, we want to create a platform that curates what we have as risk assessment. So and we can, sometimes you don't need to do risk assessment, just look at what is available and how we communicate in the possible risk assessment. And rising complexity, so we can bring next generation science. And this consortium, we have university that want to contribute, and mainly in Singapore, NTU, they are very innovative, so we can have the help of university. And transparency and coherence, this is the other solution. Open method, aligned assessment, and consistent output to enforce codex legitimacy and global confidence. So this is the solution, and I will go quickly, and after that I will give the floor for next, please. So what is our vision? Is to establish a globally connected and inclusive food risk analysis ecosystem where scientific evidence is shared transparently, capacity is strengthened across region, and food safety decisions are timely, data-driven, and trusted. So you see, we don't have, our vision is not to reduce the number of foodborne disease. No, we want that you use the right, to process well the available data to help you for making the best decision. but it is the responsibility of a risk manager at different level to achieve the objective to decrease the foodborne disease. So we are here enabler rather than the one who will achieve the objective of to reduce the foodborne disease. Next, please. So our mission is to enhance the quality, equity, and efficiency of global food risk analysis, coordinating and co-producing risk assessment, building and sustain capacity, advancing methodology, supporting existing FAO and WHO experts. We don't want to replace FAO and WHO experts, but what you are producing can feed the work of FAO and WHO and can help to start new work, for example, in Codex Alimentarius. Next, please. So just example of activity. The first objective is coordinate and deliver joint risk assessment. So main activity, share priority topic through structured calls with the countries and Codex committees. Form multinational assessment teams and define shared problem formulation and scope. It is very important that the problem formulation can be done well at the beginning to understand the purpose of the risk assessment. And undertake coordinated risk assessment, develop risk assessment that address real regulatory challenges. I take the example of salmonella in poultry. Salmonella in poultry, Greg, he did a nice quantitative risk assessment destined for management for FAO, and this model is not used. It is not used. So we can update it, for example. We can update it and not do risk assessment just for risk assessment to end up with recommendation. The objective, and that's why we changed the name. At the beginning, we said I4I could be risk assessment. We changed it to risk analysis. Why? Because when we create quantitative risk assessment for salmonella in poultry, it's not just to estimate the risk, but to provide option how to, and we create framework that country or industry can be used to implement the, their prevention. Or, so this is very important. And beyond that, the framework is not only at industry level, but the framework will help the country to increase their capacity for monitoring. For salmonella is a good example. If you want to monitor salmonella, you need to know the number of cases in human, have sample, understand which serotypes, which you can use whole genome sequencing. You need to monitor what you have in foods, and you need to monitor what you have at farm level, at animal level. So it is this kind of project that you want is not just deliver risk assessment. We go beyond the normative work, and we try to provide framework to implement. And prepare mature harmonized evidence packages suitable for FAO. This is what we repeated several times. Second objective is strengthen global capacity. So regional training, hubs, mentoring and fellowships, joint teams pairing experience and emerging institutions. So if you have a new institution, we can help them to increase their capacity building, and learning by doing. This is very important way for us. Next, third, build shared data evidence infrastructure, shared data platform for exposure. We have the experience here. In Europe, we had and BFR, and I used to work in the French food safety agency, ANSES, and DTU, the Danish Technology University. We have the RAKIP project, where we work together on how to share available data, how to share them, how to describe the available data, and how to describe what is available in risk assessment. And the last strategic objective is innovation and risk assessment, pilot frameworks for novel food safety evaluation, guidance on the regulatory use of NAMs and AI-enabled analytics, and we want to have system risk approaches integrating nutrition, sustainability, and climate impact. It is something for the future. So next, please. So we are, for the moment, 4 founding partners. We we bring this idea, myself, Greg Pauli, Samuel, and William Chen. Unfortunately, he's not here, but he will be here tomorrow. He's from NTU Singapore. So this is a quick idea about the project. So I think we'll have a lot of questions. How we will fund this? Who can be members? So we can be open to that. So if you have some question and you didn't succeed today to answer the question, here my email for further discussion. So is there any reaction from the table and from the audience? We have 1 minute. So I give you the floor to conclude, so if you have only 1 minute.
Well, I think we are standing between our colleagues' lunch and the end of this session, so I would like to use this opportunity first to thank you, to thank all my fellow panelists for their contributions. So I think actually a round of applause is deserved. But also to thank you for your level of commitment and participation. We lost a few colleagues, but many of you and most of you stayed around. I believe this is a testament to the importance of this issue. What was presented today is really a start of the development of a solution that really requires the collective commitment. Moaz left you his email, and actually we welcome your input in that. We strongly believe in this initiative and its benefits, and actually in the way it complements what we have identified in terms of global action in supporting food regulatory science overall. What I4ACT does is actually more targeted to addressing some key issues in food risk analysis capacity, but also in producing actual outputs in support of some questions that may be posed, whether be it novel foods, novel ingredients, novel processes, and so on. So with that, I'm going to actually consider that this session is concluded. I would like to invite you to visit, there is a QR code somewhere, I don't know, for the 4th Global Food Regulatory Science Symposium, which is part of the Dubai International Food Safety Conference. We have other sessions that are organized as part of the conference that I would like to invite you to join us for. And by all means, thank you very much and looking forward to seeing you again. Yeah, that's the QR code if you wish to access also the material that was shared during the session and actually the upcoming material. Thank you.